I'm Lisa Jane Vargas, and I'm a coach with Assured Strategy. And we are a coaching firm that helps businesses grow and scale using the scaling up model, along with our Assured Strategy model of techniques and tools. So we have a great team of coaches that have a ton of experience, and this is one little sliver of information that we're going to share with you today around the work that we do, and hopefully will be helpful to all of you. So I think it's okay if you're not on mute. If you are, that's fine. If you have questions, I can't see everyone. You can put questions in the chat, and I have Violaine helping out with the chat piece. And also, we are recording this today. So, all right. Well, welcome. We are glad you're here. And our topic for today is on mastering time management, prioritize to thrive. Let's dive in. So I wanted to start out today with, and a lot of the things I'm going to bring up for you today might be self-reflective, or if you want to jump in and answer, that's fine. But what brought you here today? Like, why are you here? If you can ask yourself that question. I came up with a couple answers that I thought might be what you might say. So one could be, how can I prioritize tasks effectively to make the most of my time? What are the most effective ways to manage and schedule meetings to avoid wasting time? Or maybe, how do I effectively manage interruptions while still maintaining productivity? Or possibly, how do I create a work-life integration that allows me to be productive at work while still having time for my personal life? So I'm sure there's a ton of reasons why you're here today, and these might be some of the top ones, but the way things are in our world right now, I hear often with the clients we work with, and for myself and even my support system and my friends and family, how distracted we are, or I can be, that it takes me away from the things that I really need to get done. Those kinds of comments are pretty common today, I'd say. So, you know, how do we be effective in our work? How do we be productive, even at the projects that we might have at home? So hopefully some of the things I share with you today, some of the tools and concepts will be helpful for you, and there'll be at least one nugget or one little takeaway that you can use starting today. So these concepts, as I mentioned, can apply for yourself and or for you and your team. What the big idea is today comes from Stephen Covey, and I just love this quote, and I heard it recently, and so it just popped up when I was searching for quotes, and I'm like, yep, this is the one. The key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. So the way I read that and interpret that is, am I in control of what's on my schedule and what I do in a day-to-day or a week or a month or a quarter? What kind of control do I have versus my schedule or other people's schedules, having the priority and in control over my calendar or whatever it is. So I just love that quote. So now let's take a look at a tool that is referenced in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, called the Time Matrix. And maybe you've heard of this tool. We use it so often with our clients at Assured Strategy. It's part of our leadership training and executive training. So let's take a look at the time matrix. And if you've heard it before, maybe just there might be something in today that might pop out at you that maybe you have heard before, but makes more sense today. Maybe you haven't heard it before. So a lot of what we do is about repetition because I don't think we learn always just one time out of the gate. So it's good to read books, look at tools, and hear different perspectives, maybe more than once. So here is the tool, and it's probably a little small on your screen, and I want to let you know that all the tools that I go over today, we can provide to you in an email after the webinar today that you can use for yourself and your teams. So the time matrix, this is what our tool of the time matrix looks like. So maybe you're a leader, maybe you're not, but as leaders, we're trying to get more of our time into quadrant 2. So there's 4 quadrants of this matrix, and I'm going to kind of dive in a little bit more into each. But the more time we spend in quadrant 2, then the better our company will be. Quadrant 3 is considered more time suck, and the goal is to be more effective in managing those tasks or activities in quadrant 3. Quadrant 4 is an area that we should minimize. And we're also going to touch on quadrant 1. So let's start first with defining the axes, if you will. So we have the things on the top that identify our urgent tasks and not urgent tasks. Then we also have important and not important. And it may seem kind of simple, but let me just explain these a little bit more. And I'm just going to explain urgent and important. So our urgent tasks require immediate action and a time frame for doing them. That's probably an ASAP, right? This needs to be done right away. If they're not completed by a deadline, they can have significant repercussions and sometimes cause high levels of stress due to the time-sensitive nature. Okay, so an example of an urgent task might be handling a PR situation that comes up around your company. Like, this isn't something that we want to put off for later. It's an urgent task or activity that needs to be handled right away. And then let's talk a little bit about the important tasks. These are the ones that contribute to long-term goals, AKA big rocks, big goals, and they represent the foundation for other projects. So when they are absent, you'd not be able to manage your other finalizing tasks and have sustained progress. So these are important, even if they're not urgent. Important tasks have a lasting impact, both professionally and sometimes even personally, and even on our well-being. So I'm kind of trying to straddle here professional and personal. I mentioned one of the reasons why you might be here today has to do with work-life integration. And I want to highlight that here for a minute because this has to do with that. So work-life integration is a concept that we use versus work-life balance. So work-life balance means that we're working on one or the other and not really together to create a fullness, a holistic presence, a holistic being, instead of just working on one or the other to balance something. So we like to look at that concept as our work affects our personal life and our life affects our work. It just does. So how can we work these together? And when we pay attention to the tasks or activities that are urgent and important, not urgent and not important, then that can affect that work-life integration for us. So let's look at quadrant number 1. Quadrant number 1, these are the things that are urgent and important and comprise of things that need to be done more immediately. So these must get done, right? We can also call this the business whirlwind. Issues and crises pop up here. So there's no choice but to do these urgent matters. And if these important and time-sensitive tasks are not finalized as soon as possible, they sometimes can have significant consequences and maybe even affect our long-term goals. So a way to imagine a task that falls into this category is maybe like an unforeseen event that requires you to drop all your responsibilities and to focus on resolving those urgent issues. So you're in a thing, you're in a project, in a task, in an activity, but no, wait, something pops up that you need to drop and stop and attend to this. So even if it's super stressful, many people can spend their whole lives in quadrant one, letting life problems take control. But spending too much time in this quadrant will not allow you to really grow because you're always going to be in crisis and looking for the next problem to solve, or it just pops up and you need to kind of put out the fires, right? So it's putting out the fires. In this tool, we provide some questions, some self-reflective questions that we can ask ourselves. And this might be looking forward, foreshadowing, maybe part of a homework that you can do for yourself. In the day, are the repeated patterns that might be causing more of a systemic problem for me? So again, just raising your awareness by having this conversation with yourself or even your peers or support system. All right, so let's now look at our quadrant number 2. This is where we have the opportunity to improve our effectiveness, right? This is where we have scheduling and planning. So they're not really urgent issues or activities or tasks, but they are important, right? Important to the company, important to progress, to your advancement in your role, perhaps. So essentially, as you're not dealing with maybe pressing problems, you have more freedom to take a breath before you schedule time in performing other tasks. But the thread of this quadrant is about scheduling. You have time to schedule, you have time to think, you have time to plan. It allows you to perform an important task more effectively and productively at a chosen time. So you have a little more control here, right? You have a little more control maybe of that to-do list. The question perhaps that you could ask yourself around these kinds of pieces of your day and your time and your activities is, do you live with integration? Is this like you just know when you're there, you have that flow, you have that feeling of things are working together, right? I hope all of you have felt that at some point or another. If not, maybe you now have some awareness where you can strive toward that. All right, quadrant number 3. These are the areas and the tasks of our day that are urgent but not important, or they might seem urgent, right? So these are less critical tasks. And although these are urgent tasks that come to you only when you can take off the quality, excuse me, all these urgent tasks that come to you only to take off your quality time. So basically, that I said that wrong. These are the things that take away from your quality time, okay? It can be meetings, it can be phone calls, it can be dings, all the little dings, the phone interruptions, the things that disrupt our work, right? So it's distracting me from the results or the project or the deadline or the thing I really need to be focusing on. And then ultimately, we want to spend as little time here in this quadrant as we can. But this area is the area where we might be able to delegate, right? So if a certain number of emails are coming in or a project is coming in that really is going to be distracting you from your results, is this something that you can delegate to a project manager or another employee that's better suited and has maybe that skill or that genius for that task or project? So the question here to ask is, am I following my time to be, or is it being hijacked? So is my time being hijacked today? You know, And again, it's having a sense and having an awareness of, yes, it is, or no, it's not. I really need to attend to this. And then you would be in another quadrant of the time matrix or of your day. So let's look at then quadrant number 4, which are the tasks, activities that are not urgent and not important. I'm wondering how much of us spend time here, and maybe more time than we really want to or should, but might not always be aware of it or have control of it. So this is the tasks that we consider mindless, maybe. We want to eliminate or lessen these in our day. As you spend more and more time here, all your energy gets sucked somewhere else out into the ether, and you can end up in procrastination, maybe doom scrolling. That's a whole nother subject. Watching TV. Now, I don't want to say that you should never do this. In my opinion, just my opinion, sometimes we need to maybe time block, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. When we can attend to some of this, just to kind of get a reprieve from our day. But I think it's really going to be about time blocking for this quadrant. So otherwise, it can really take us, take our mental capacity somewhere that isn't really productive and effective for us. So, all right. So that in a nutshell is what we call the time matrix. And then to help us, a tool that helps us drill down into the areas where we might be able to delegate and how we manage our times and tasks is this time matrix assessment. That is another tool that I'm happy to send over to you. In the essence of time, because I do have quite a bit to go over yet today, this is pretty easy. There's 8 questions that you can reflect on, answer from 1 to 6, whether you strongly disagree or agree. And I'm going to recommend take it now after this webinar and see where you land in your results. And then maybe take it a month from now and see if there's any kind of change. So you can do this for yourself personally. You can do this with your teams. So it's a very helpful tool. On the side here, on here a second, I want to share a story with you because I recently worked with a client actually since last December. And we've seen significant change in his life, work-life integration over the last 5 or 6 months. And I asked him to write it out. So I just wanted to share this with you. He said in December, he was working crazy hours, 70 to 80 hours a week. Maybe some of you can identify with that. He said most of his time was spent kind of in the tasks. Now he's a manager, he's a leader, right, of his department, but he was spending most of his time doing what the people he was leading was doing as well. So he was really focusing on the tasks with very little time managing and leading his team. His team and his senior leadership both made it clear that they needed him to spend more time leading and less time doing. He also needed to shift his time so that 90% of his time was spent on more important but not urgent tasks, which is in the quadrant 2 of the matrix. So he had a level of awareness once we started implementing these tools and working with this. So after some of the coaching that we went through and some of the training, he was able to completely change his approach to work. He was empowering his team, allowing them to make decisions and be accountable. 2 of his key team members were now thriving and taking challenges on without constant input from him. His work-life integration shifted from 70 to 80 hours a week to 40 to 50 hours a week, which was helping him not only personally, but professionally. There was more trust built with he and his team and the team members themselves. They were reaching goals. And it gave him the opportunity, working in that quadrant 2 of the time matrix, to be able to be more creative, strategic, looking at new ideas for new products. And it was less stress on him as a leader, which also translated to less stress for the team. So there was more productivity and efficiency all around. And ultimately, this had helped his personal life and being able to be more available for his family. So I just love hearing stories like that when it works, but it took work. It took his footwork and implementing some of these tools for him. So, all right, I just wanted to share that incredible story with you. From there, we also have another tool that we can take a look at, a little bit more granular of the tasks that we do in a day or a week or however long, called the enjoyment and competency matrix. So I'm going to explain this a little bit, and then again, we'll send this afterwards if you want to do it on your own. But how this tool works is that we ask you or the team to make a list of your top 10 primary tasks that you do on your job. And it might seem like, oh my gosh, how can I write 10? But 10, that's what we want you to write out. Make that list for yourself. We want you to be honest, pardon me. Come into this with an honest perspective. There might be some fear, there might be some ego, there might be some blind spots, but that's okay. Just be honest with yourself. I'm sorry, excuse me. So when we write those tasks, we think about our competency. Now, competency is defined as being able to understand the underlying philosophy of an activity such that we can recreate that activity from scratch with near perfect results. And we also understand the context of an activity to avoid any missteps, maybe that somebody new to this might make in trying the activity for the first time. So with that as kind of our definition, we could be certain levels of competency. We could be experts, competent, some knowledge, and not capable. Okay. And again, this is all self-reflective. Then we take a look at our enjoyment around the tasks. Enjoyment, considering it being more of a deeper question around maybe your true commitment to something. Is this something you love doing? Is this something you like doing? Or maybe you tolerate it, or maybe you just loathe this task. So once you take those tasks, you would plot them into this matrix. And then we have another results tool that you would kind of like lay on top of this, if you will. And what you do, once you plot those tasks, and you can have more than one task in a box, then we take a look at the bigger picture. We take a step back, and how do we show up with our tasks? I did this for myself, and I was surprised but not surprised, but it gives us some idea on, okay, these are the things that I really love and like. These are my strengths. Like I could mentor someone in these tasks. And maybe I want to lean into that a little bit more in the time that I spend. Then we have a section here where we might like and love a task, but we don't have a whole lot of knowledge about it. And that might be an area for our own self-growth where, okay, I need to maybe spend an hour, like I want to do some research on this thing that I like and love because I want to increase my knowledge. So that's going to take a chunk of my time. Then we have the area where we keep to a minimum, where we want to, maybe we can tolerate the activity. We're we're an expert and we're pretty competent and we have some knowledge about it, but don't really like it or love it. So this is an area that we might want to oversee these tasks. And again, we're getting a little more specific so you can actually be able to take action on this using this tool. And then we have the ones that we just really don't like. We're really good at them and we're really competent, but just don't like. And I wonder, do y'all have those? Like, I think that's just normal, natural for everyone, right? We all have things that we're really good at, but just don't really like to do. So this is the area where maybe we can delegate those tasks, provide some mentoring maybe. But we call this the last resort because, yeah, okay, let's see what I can do. And if you look at some of the other concepts of, you know, the advanced insights, using advanced insights and working geniuses models to really understand where people's strengths and weaknesses are, those tools might be helpful to delegate to the appropriate person who really does like those tasks and activities. So there's definitely some ways you can work with this tool and move around and find ways to be more effective. So I talked a little bit earlier about time blocking. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So what is it and why? Time blocking is about scheduling specific blocks of time for different tasks and activities that we do throughout the day. So once we have an idea, big picture of the time matrix, I have more awareness on the time that I put into my day, where I spend most of my time. I'm a leader and I know I need to be more in quadrant 2. I need to be doing more strategic planning with my leadership team, the team that I'm on. I need to be delegating more for the team that I'm in, that I'm supporting, I'm leading, so kind of coming up with all those awarenesses, knowing what you're good at, what you like, what you don't like, the enjoyment, what your competency and enjoyment matrix reveals. Let's see if this will work here, sorry. Time blocking begins then with prioritizing. So what's the most important thing on my list, my schedule? So going back to that, do we schedule our priorities or do we prioritize our schedule? So prioritizing what's most important. One of the things that I like to do is at the beginning of my week on Monday mornings, I actually have a handwritten calendar and I like to handwrite the things that are priorities first on my calendar for the entire week. So I know what really needs to be done and prioritized and what's most important. The next thing to time blocking is to allocate. Allocate means what's a realistic amount of time that's needed for that task. I'm just going to use the word task, for that task, per task. We can have some flexibility in that, and it might be something that we think right now, the amount of time I need for this is this much, but over time that might change as you get more familiar with this tool, this model. You also might want to think about any buffers that are needed for anything unexpected. If you work with clients back to back, do you need some time to take a refresher? Do you need to take maybe a few minutes to do something in particular, to grab a cup of coffee or use the restroom? So kind of think about that as you time block as well. Time blocking doesn't work for everyone, but for a lot of people, this is a really useful and helpful tool to help us know that from this time to this time, this is what I'm dedicated to, and this is what I'm focusing on. Then we create the blocks with our tools. So we have a ton of tools today, calendars, planners, productivity apps, our phones. We schedule blocks that can be both work related and personal related. Oftentimes I hear people put in blocks for working out. You know, my first hour of my day is going to be for me, and I'm going to put that on my tool of calendar or however I keep track of things, that's going to be my time, and that's what I'm focused on for that period of time. Of course, now there can be flexibility, but we really want to try to stick with the block that we set for ourselves. Then the next piece of time blocking is called batching. So we batch similar tasks. I have a story of a friend of mine just came to me the other day and she's like, I have these like things, these tasks that don't really connect with each other, but I need to do them all on my laptop. Like that's the tool that I'm using to do these activities, these tasks. And what can I call it? I don't know, call it laptop time, like that's your time block. Call it laptop time, but you're doing a bill, you're setting a dentist appointment and you're looking up about this retreat or whatever it is. So maybe batching could be helpful for you where you batch similar tasks, phone calls, meetings, checking your bank statements or whatever it is. Then the next piece of time blocking is focusing and eliminating distractions. So as I just mentioned, there's going to be distractions. We need to have a little flexibility, but if we can at all eliminate or lessen any kind of distractions, minimizing them, such as closing the door, silencing dings and dongs and things, noises and alerts. We really don't I mean, you got to determine, right? You got to discern whether you need to be dinged and dong throughout something or not. But oftentimes we don't need those alerts to distract us. Setting boundaries with yourself and with others. That's a whole nother topic, but boundaries are for us. We set boundaries for ourselves. It's not to keep someone out, it's to help us stay in a block or in a container, time block, a container, so that we can be most effective and productive. There's this technique that as I was doing some research, called the Pomodoro technique. And it's really interesting if you want to take a look at it. I'm not going to go into too much here, but it's working for set periods of time, like 25-minute chunks, and then taking a 5-minute break, and then going back and setting another 25-minute chunk of time to work on something. Maybe it's a project where you chunk it out like that, 25 minutes to get it done over a day or whatever it might be. So check that out, Pomodoro technique. And then we want to review and adjust. So emphasizing our importance of regularly reviewing and adjusting time blocks based on our changing priorities, deadlines, productivity patterns. Again, it's not like this hard and fast, end all be all. This is a container, a way to work more effectively. And it's good to review, it's good to adjust, it's good to evolve and maybe create iterations of time blocking for yourselves. Reflect. Maybe at the end of the week, you're like, okay, this thing worked and this thing didn't work, and adjust where you need to. And then we want to take a look at the consistency of this and the discipline. So, are we sticking to the time blocks? I'm definitely, a candidate for I can set a time block and forget it or breeze over it. So again, that's why reviewing, taking a look, am I being consistent? How's my discipline around this? Procrastination can be alive and well in time blocking. So treat your time blocks as sacred And at the very best, try to resist temptation to deviate from your schedule. And then we want to introduce some communication and collaboration, meaning discuss your time blocks with other people. Like my friend came to me and she's like, I have this thing I need to do to create a time block. What do you suggest? What do you think? So we kind of talked about it a little bit. It's okay. Another story with the Johari window where we might put up masks, where we sometimes maybe look like we're all together, we got it all together. It's okay to be vulnerable and talk to your teammates and your peers, about maybe some struggles you're having in Sarah. Maybe they have some ideas that can help you out, to minimize any kind of other situations or conflicts that might come up for you. So, yeah. And then we want to practice. This is all about practice. Not out of the gate are we going to get this perfect, right? So practice, ask for feedback, give yourself the opportunity to practice. This might even be helpful for someone else that you talk with or introduce this to. So that's a little bit about time blocking. And if I asked you what is maybe one of the biggest time wasters that you can think of in your work life, I bet some of you might say that it's meetings, right? Meetings. So let's go to the topic of meetings. So I wonder how many of you might struggle with meetings. We love to teach about meeting rhythms. It creates some structure, some way to be more efficient, accomplish a little bit more than just having all ad hoc kind of meetings. But we talk about meeting rhythms, and here's 4 types of meeting rhythms that we like to introduce at Assured Strategy. The daily huddle. This is something that happens every day at the same time, usually around 12 to 15 minutes. A lot of times people call it a stand up or, it's a standing meeting. And by the way, I'm going from smallest to larger length of time meetings here. Weekly meetings could be every week. Again, at the same time, having some consistency helps your team know what to expect as far as their own schedules, right? Monthly meetings are every month, again, can be on the same day of every month or same Friday, same time, and just have it in the calendar as a standing meeting, right? Quarterly retreats or quarterly meetings are every quarter. Again, just so your team knows what to expect. These can make a huge difference in your organization. So these are come from the tools as an execution tool from the Rockefeller Habits, which has been an incredible value for a lot of the teams that we work with. The faster your company grows, the more chaotic your business environment can be, the faster your business pulses, and the more important it is for you to establish and sustain effective communication. So this is a great way, if you want to consider meeting rhythms to implement, this is a great way to do that. Great way to help with team development, communication. If you're working around the 5 dysfunctions of a team, creating trust. All right. So what's the purpose of these styles of meetings? Oop, get my cursor here. The purpose of the meeting, the daily huddle is to synchronize. So it's a quick communication style of meeting to kind of get a pulse on where everybody's at. Great, we're all synchronized, we all know what's going on, everybody goes and does their thing. The purpose of a weekly meeting is to stay focused and have that collaboration. So maybe the stucks that show up in a daily huddle we can bring at a larger scale into our weekly meetings where we can have a little more focus, collaborate on problem solving a little bit more in those weekly meetings. The weekly meetings can cascade up into the monthly meetings. This is where we introduce some learning, some solving. So we have more time in a monthly meeting to be able to learn and have a learning component of the schedule, solving bigger problems. There's certain structures and ways that we can do that that I can share with you as well. And then our quarterly meetings, the purpose of our quarterly meetings are to prioritize, to look at our quarterly, our annual, our 3-year priorities. Let's look at our critical numbers. We can really dive in more deeply into topics that we need to address as a team. So allowing these kinds of timeframes for your meetings could be very helpful and more structured and more meaningful and help improve communications and effectiveness. I'm going to show you this. It looks like a lot, but it's just an image to show you how weekly meetings tie into monthly meetings. So we consider quarters 13 weeks. So that's where you see the 13-week here. And so over a quarter, if that's how your business operates, the purpose and the structure of the meetings that I just talked about can one supports another, and then we have a nice system of meetings that are purposeful and meaningful and more structured so that we can get the most out of our time with each other as a team. Here's a tool that I want to share that can come into play into our meetings, typically more in our weekly, monthly, and annual meetings or quarterly meetings. It's called the WWW, or the who, what, when. So I'm going into this because prioritizing our schedules, prioritizing our times, some of these tasks are going to come up in the meetings that we hold, and we're going to be accountable for them. We're going to be responsible for them. So they're going to be a part of the quadrant, the time matrix, okay, where you schedule these in your time. So even though it looks really simple, sometimes this tool can be difficult. And the reason why it's difficult or challenging is because that the person who takes on or says, I'll do that task, fills this out. And it helps them be accountable. It helps them be responsible when we revisit this task list at a future meeting. If the person doesn't own it, there could be, oftentimes could be question like, well, I didn't say that. That's not really what I wanted to do, or that's really what I didn't say I would do. And it can cause some confusion and, maybe more time discussing that, right? Instead of being really clear, like, LJ, I'm the who. What I'm going to do is create a time block for myself, and I'm going to get it done by June 15th. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And at the next meeting, I can say whether I did it or not. And if I didn't do it, then I can change my date. Okay, but that's all about having clear expectations, communications, ownership in the meeting. And then also for me to be able to come back after the meeting and say, okay, this is something I need to now do and add to my priorities, right? So this is a priority for me. All right. So I'm throwing a lot at you guys. I'm just going to take a little pause here for a minute and come back to the big idea. The key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. So I'm hoping and would love to have you guys use the tools that we introduced today. Some of the tools that I introduced to schedule your priorities were the time matrix, the enjoyment competency matrix, time blocking, meeting rhythms, and the WWW. And these tools are just tools, right? You can use them, you cannot use them. Maybe there'll be some self-reflection that you can do from here. I don't know if we have any questions, so I'm not going to go turn over to the chat just yet. But does anyone want to ask any questions before I move forward toward the end here? You can just take yourself off mute or comments. And it's okay if you don't. So, when everything feels important, nothing feels important. Has anyone heard that phrase before? And I think we, especially in our world today, can feel like everything's important, right? So going back to where we started with the time matrix, we have things are important that aren't important, things are urgent that aren't or urgent. We can allow people to tell us what is urgent or not urgent, important and not important. But at the end of the day, you know, as leaders, as workers, just a person wanting that work-life integration, you know, it's okay to like even take and block time to think. Oh my gosh, like really? Yeah, you can take and block time just to think, having reflection time. Maybe it's meditation time, you know, whatever it is that might fill you up or get you to really focus on the things that are important. And even if you just take like the top 3 things that you need to prioritize, like give yourself a little grace. It doesn't have to be 100 things. Like just kind of narrow it down to 3 things to start with and work from there. But you know what, with everything, the first step is having awareness. So what I really wanted was to help bring awareness for you today around some of the ways that you manage your time, manage your life, your work, and having that awareness now, maybe taking some action. So, my challenge to you in action is to take the enjoyment competency matrix assessment for yourself. We'll send that out after the webinar here. Make sure you get that. Just one tool from today. That's probably going to be the most fun, I think. So I want to challenge you to take that exercise, plot it out for yourself, and then just start taking action. The other one I will throw in there that I mentioned earlier was the time matrix assessment, taking that today and then again in a month from now. And see if there's any difference. See if you shifted anywhere. See if there's any progress for yourself in the direction that you want to go in. All right. So with that, one more opportunity for any questions or comments.
Hi, Lisa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Hey, I really appreciate this. I love learning new strategies to be more efficient and effective. And I know who Stephen Covey is. So I got a couple questions for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I used to run teams, but now I'm in a startup. And when do you celebrate the small wins using this strategy? Because I think that's a very, very important piece to being successful.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Well, can I just ask? Well, I'll answer, and then I want to hear your response, if you don't mind, John, sharing, because I think that's a part of this, like let's all share what we do, right? But I honestly, up until a couple years ago, I don't think I did celebrate wins enough for myself. And I think that's a big miss. And I do want to emphasize, so thank you so much for bringing that up, because we why not? Wins are so important, and that is part of our day. And to have that for you and your team, I mean, it could be, if you kind of follow the scaling up model, we do quarterly when we have our quarterly priorities and rocks, when we meet our critical numbers, we decide on what kind of win that'll be. Maybe it's you kind of create a theme around that celebration, if you want to do it on a quarterly basis. For yourself personally, I mean, I'm a fan of, at the end of the day, what was my one win today? And how do I want to celebrate that for myself? Um, you know, I know a lot of teams are fans of food, but so much of us are working remotely now too. So, how can that be done remotely? There's so many ideas. There's so many ideas around that, but that concept, John, I think is really important. So thank you for bringing that up.
I got a couple more minutes. Let me ask you my questions, and I will be happy to share what my experience is like. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
What are the challenges you've seen working with small startups versus large corporation? Because I've seen it on both sides.
Around this topic.
Yep, efficiency and
Hmm.
priorities.
Well, we work with primarily, I'm going to call it small to mid-size organizations, and um, believe it or not, sometimes folks are not using the technology that they have access to, and so sometimes it's just bringing awareness to using the technology most efficiently. Sometimes it's also we have too much technology, and I've seen this. We have Teams chats, we have other chats, we have this chat, and there's like too many ways to communicate and log, calendars. So I think it's important in my perspective, and maybe somebody else has a different view, to really just focus on one thing, one way, because then there's less confusion. There's one channel, and again, it depends on how many departments and things like that. But I think simple is better, honestly.
Yeah.
And so I think those are, off the top of my head, two challenges I've
Yeah.
seen.
Last one. What language and emotions do you use or suggest when writing out these tasks and priorities?
What language did you?
Yeah, language and emotions. Because how we convey our priorities sometimes, um, you can say, I get to do or I have to do, and
Hmm.
it's a psychological thing, right? But from a coaching
Hmm.
standpoint, I always found that if you put something that's more exciting to do, despite it's a dread,
Hmm.
it changes the outcome.
Hmm. I love that. And I'm a fan too. Psychology is part of my background. So anytime I can say I get to do something, it does change the tone, the perspective, the framework that I'm already out of the gate experiencing. And in reality, I think we get to do what we get to do, really, on a daily basis. Even if we have to do it, we get to do it.
Yeah,
Try to find the positive in the thing, in the task, in the activity. I, you know, off to the side,
yeah,
I believe there's always a gift or a lesson. So,
thank you. Yeah, so very quickly, you asked me what I've done, my experience. From a large corporation standpoint, I used to work for United Health Group, and I was managing a cybersecurity team, one of 12 teams, and the team that I inherited was the worst team because the leadership before me was very focused on goals and not the culture. And so it was very hard because half of the team were from India, the other half was US, and we were 24 by 7. And
mhm,
just imagine. And so when you work with a very technical team, they are very they read between the lines a lot. They're very, very technical without saying that too much.
Mm-hmm.
But the challenge was the communication, and yeah, too many meetings. But the first question, celebrating wins, I made it a thing where we police for success, small wins, a change in their demeanor, change in their growth.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see someone who's been struggling and then they make strides to make improvements, that was a way for me to acknowledge that. And it wasn't just coming from me; it was from their peers as well. And then
Yeah.
flattening the org allowed opportunities for everybody to see how the different responsibilities from different roles, whether they were level 1 or a 3, and it added a lot of collaboration. And
Mm-hmm.
then the task and priorities, we had these meetings where every morning you had a minute to share what you were working on, what you needed help with. You would ask, and then at the end of the day, we would do a follow up. So we always ended on a good note.
Mm-hmm.
I always focus on the small wins, and the challenges were opportunities. And then the monthly and the annual stuff, that's what we did too, because I follow
Mm-hmm.
Stevie Covey's work quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the language, that's where you have to have a good pulse on your team, and
Mm-hmm.
whatever the background is.
Mm-hmm.
And so use the right language. And
Mm-hmm.
there's always an opportunity for coaching. And
Mm-hmm.
as a leader, you always have to check yourself on how you show up. And
Yes,
so I
indeed.
love how your team has made this very simple as far as
Mm-hmm.
the format. And
Yeah.
so I'm very excited for anybody who wants to do this. I've always found these are so important
Mm-hmm.
when you have a company as large as United Health Group, and we were protecting all the
Mm-hmm.
assets.
Mm-hmm.
And then now I'm in a startup, and so
Mm-hmm.
the many layers of structure can't be understated, and you got to
Mm-hmm.
really understand what's
Mm-hmm.
important now versus what
Mm-hmm.
needs to be done later. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you. That was really great share. I really appreciate it. And some really great nuggets in there as well. You made me think actually of the meetings, from the daily huddle to the monthly meetings and quarterly meetings. We always start out with good news. So it does set the tone, personal and professional good news. The other great way to celebrate wins is if you're not doing one-on-ones as a leader with your team, that's something that we highly recommend because it's a way to you really get a lot of information. You get to know your team, you get to know what drives them, what lights them up, and then finding a way to celebrate with something is easier. Then you know what lights them up. So there's so many great ways to celebrate. So speaking of celebrating, I want to let you know that we have some upcoming events for growth focused individuals and business leaders like you. Here's some of the workshops that we have coming up in San Diego in the summer, not a bad place to be. And then Denver and then Fort Lauderdale. And then we have some webinars that are coming up. So always feel free to look at our website. We have a ton of new information that shows up there all the time. And I'm so glad that you all were able to join us today. And we will follow up with emails and tools for you all. So with that, have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.